so I don't forget.
This conference will now be recorded.
Mike, I forgot to tell you, you might want to check the bot. No, we're good. The last video, that camera was all the way up.
Yeah,
I didn't notice it until I rewatched it. I re-angled it. It set it back down.
looks
I
good.
think we're good now.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it until I went back to the meeting.
I don't know
minutes.
why it started to reset itself occasionally now.
I think when
Maybe when the power goes out.
I think it's when the power goes out. Yeah.
Well, then I don't know why the power's been going out occasionally. Some way I'll figure out.
Time of the year, I think.
Maybe a backup generator would help.
Sure, I think we're working on one of those, right?
We ought to work on that. Danny would appreciate that more than anything. Absent this evening. I agree. I don't know in what that's referencing to, but I'm a. Oh, the length. Yeah. Oh, we got budget. I know. Okay. Okay. All right. Just give me a 5-minute warning when you're ready to be done.
This is a short. So the mayor introduces and says.
5-minute warning.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the June 20th City Council meeting to order. We'll start with roll call, please.
Tripp,
Here.
Daniels,
Here.
Hunter-Michael,
Here.
McMurray,
Here.
Lane. Mayor, it appears Councilmember Lane is absent.
Okay. I would invite you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item tonight is our consent agenda tonight on the from the June 6th City Council meeting, approval of pay ordinance number 97. Approve request for special council meeting on July 2nd and approve quote from Rice Check Drilling Company for well 17 repair. Further discussion. May I have a motion to approve, please?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
McMurray,
Yes.
Hunter-Michael.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Tripp.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Item 2 is call to the public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business not listed on tonight's agenda. There's a 4-minute time limit. Does anyone wish to address the council under call? All right, I don't see anybody, so we will go. Item 3 is old business, and we don't have any, so we'll go to item 4A to discuss revising city code to allow pit bulls within the city.
Yes, Mayor and Council. This is a follow-up to our conversation in March regarding the DeSoto pit bull ban. Patrick, Whitney, Cameron, Jay, and I have all been working on this issue the last several months. And as you can see from the materials provided, there's extensive research on this topic, and it is a highly controversial topic in local government. Over the last several years, many communities across the country have studied this issue, yielding various outcomes. Some communities have removed the ban, while others have kept the ban in place. After thorough research, staff could not find a consensus or best practice within the medical and veterinary communities on the effectiveness of a pit bull ban. As a result, staff has prepared a memo that includes the history of the pit bull ban in DeSoto, local data, input from our local vet, which we'll hear from in a minute, some survey information that Whitney put together, and relevant research. Just to kind of kick us off, we'll do a little bit of a history lesson. So in 1994, DeSoto passed an ordinance banning specific breeds commonly referred to as pit bulls due to the perception that these breeds were unnecessarily dangerous and prone to severe attacks. Significant portions of the medical community still hold this opinion. Recently, there's been a significant movement to remove these bans across the country. For example, in Prairie Village and Overland Park, the Kansas City area, they have held public meetings and ultimately removed these bans. However, Leawood recently studied this issue and decided to leave their ban mostly in place. Staff, mostly led by the city attorney, has provided summaries of relevant research from medical professionals. Additionally, this memo includes bite reports from DeSoto, Edgerton, and unincorporated Johnson County provided by the Johnson County Sheriff's Office from 2019 through April of 2024. If there are any questions about the memo, please feel free to ask, although I will admit that, at least from my opinion, I am not an expert on this matter. I've done research, I'm not an expert, so we'll do our best to answer your questions. Given the controversial nature of this topic, staff remains neutral. We do have Dr. Matt Fair, the owner of the DeSoto Vet Clinic, here as our local expert to provide his professional opinion on the matter. Following that, we'll have Whitney give a brief overview of the flash vote survey that was conducted last week. And then finally, staff asked for council to provide some direction on how to proceed with the matter. So with that, I would invite Dr. Matt to come up and give his brief comments on the matter.
I didn't prepare a lot. They asked if I wanted to do a presentation. I'm not big on presentations. I'm open to questions. I think most in my profession don't feel that breed-specific bans are super effective. Some of the stuff that I have found, when you ban specific breeds, people that are prone to get those types of breeds get other large, powerful breeds. And so, like if you ban pit bulls, then Shepherd and Rottweiler bites go up, So I think it's more of you have to look at the specific animals as opposed to the breed. There's a whole lot of breeds out there that are just as prone, in my opinion, to bite, on my day-to-day basis, that I get approached by just as many probably Shepherds or other, large breeds that are prone to bite me in my day-to-day than pit bulls. I think it becomes a very emotional topic. I'm very good at playing devil's advocate. I read through some of the data that comes from the human doctors and plastic surgeons and such that really support these types of bans. And they make very good arguments as far as the severity of the bites that come from these breeds. And so I don't necessarily want to take a side by any means, but like I say, I think most of us think that it's more animal specific, not just trying to pigeonhole the entire breed and say no. And then you come across, how difficult is it to say this is a pit bull, or, the ordinance is actually pretty broad in the definition of pit bull. It covers a lot of different breeds, and so basically it probably covers it pretty well. The other question is that I guess the question I have is how well enforced is the ordinance at this time anyways? And that's I don't know the answer to that. I know there's I know there are some definite pit bull breeds or pit bull like breeds that reside in the city so I don't know. I'm definitely open to questions. I told Brandon, I was like, I'm open to this being a conversation.
Well, appreciate you coming, sharing your time with us. I would invite, if the council had any questions of Dr. Matt, can I call you Dr. Matt?
Of course, I prefer that.
Feel free. I'm guessing that in your practice, you regularly treat pit bull?
Yeah, every day probably.
Yeah,
They're a very popular breed.
yeah.
And yes, some of them can be a little aggressive, but there are some of them that are the biggest puppy dogs, just lovers. And so it's hard to say we can't have this breed when they are a very popular breed.
Maybe to answer your question on enforcement, at least since I've been here, it's really just been complaint based. Like,
Yeah,
if a dog gets picked up by the sheriff's office and it's a pit bull, we, tell the owner you can't have that dog in the city, and they have to remove the dog. But as you probably know, there's pit bulls across the city, so we don't,
right.
affirmatively take action to pick up every pit bull. But when there's an issue, a bite, or, the dog comes into, the city's realm, so to speak, we do.
Yeah.
do enforce it.
Another thing that I was questioning Brandon on is if we had the data to back up whether the pit bull ban did any good. I was asking, he was showing the bite data from the last few years, but do we, and he said it's probably difficult to get the bite data from prior to 1994 unless you want to go digging through all the paper records. But, it would be interesting to see whether it made a difference in the bites or overall, really. Obviously, if there's a pit bull ban, you're going to expect to see pit bull bites go down, but it didn't make a difference overall in the bites.
Obviously, none of us were sitting here in 1994, so I don't know what the
Right.
impetus was, to enact that ban.
Right.
I know that kind of swept through the Kansas City area at that time, and so my speculation is that we were just kind of caught up in that whole wagon of pit bull bans, coming through communities
Right.
at that time. Overland Park, Lenexa, somebody started it, Prairie Village, and then it just made its way through the county. And
Yeah, and I think it was a little different time then too. I think at that point, I don't have this statistically back this up, but I think in my own opinion, I think there was probably more dogfighting in that period of time or prior to that. I think pit bulls were not as commonly family pets. I could be wrong on that, but I think they've become a lot more popular as family pets in the last 15, 20 years probably.
any questions for
One of the things talked about in the kind of council memo is, this idea of responsible pet ownership and leaning into that versus breed-specific language in ordinances. And was wondering if you had any thoughts on the city's role that we could play in helping to enforce and promote responsible pet ownership as, a possible future path.
And,
Yeah.
as you go into that, I'm the one that actually asked this to come up because I've had a lot of residents ask me about it. But at the same time, I've had a lot of residents ask about enforcement of biting dogs and things like that. And every single one that asked about enforcement of the biting dogs was not a pit bull.
Right.
It was other dogs, whether it be Clearview City, Timber Ridge, and it wasn't just one neighborhood around here. It was several, and it leans more towards the responsible ownership of they're just letting their dogs out. So that was one of the things that when I brought this up to Brandon, it was kind of a twofold thing of, okay, the pit bull and how do we enforce the responsible ownership and or the threatening biting dog type of situation.
Yeah, I think I would love to enforce somehow responsible ownership. You really get into that nature versus nurture and raising and, how they're raised and socialization. And it's kind of funny. I've talked to a few of my colleagues on this, and we all kind of agree that it'd be nice if you had to have a permit to own certain breeds because you would be, I brought up shepherds earlier. Some of my favorite favorite patients are shepherds. They're the best dogs. Those are the people that take care of them, know they need a job, give them that job. They're trained, right? They're well behaved. others, shepherds, that are not given the socialization, not given the discipline, they are one of the first ones to come at you, you know, and or bite and fight and whatever. So I think, I don't know how you enforce responsible pet ownership other than potentially make people criminally liable when their pet acts out. You know, if you have a pet, you know that pet pretty well. If I had a dog that I thought was going to bite somebody, if I took it somewhere in public, it would have a muzzle on. You know, I'd always have it on a short leash. You know, and that's a lot of what, and in the ordinance, there's dangerous dog, you know, statutes in the ordinance. And so maybe we just expand on that, or how that's criminally liable. You know, so, and I don't know,
And certainly the permitting is another
right,
potential pathway.
right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming and sharing your time with us.
Yeah.
And, please, we may call you up for another question. I don't know as this goes on.
That's fine. Just let me know if you have questions. I'm always around.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready for Whitney to kind of come up and give a brief overview of the flash poll survey that went out last week and kind of walk you through the results.
Good evening, Council. So staff wanted to give a well-rounded group of resources and information. So of course, we wanted to get the initial feedback and input from the residents. So we put out a flash vote poll. So as a reminder, flash vote is a 48-hour quick pulse program that surveys a panel of people that have signed up to take surveys on any range of city topics. So when they open their phone, they have no idea what topic they're about to take a survey on, which makes it a little bit more representative of the community, because they're not self-selecting to take a specific survey on a community center or a pit bull survey. So our survey was aimed at gauging public opinion on whether the city should revise its current policy or consider revising it in some way with or without additional restrictions. And so there's some other questions that go along with this as well. So first, it's important to note that approximately half of locals were not aware of the current pit bull ban prior to this survey. I think that's pretty interesting. Now, what this topic is, this survey was mainly about was how do people feel about it, and about 31% of locals said they are in favor of keeping the existing ban. And then about, conversely, 58% is in favor of revising the ban or the policy in some way with or without restrictions. So about 30% say they are in favor of removing the ban without restrictions, and about 28 would like to see it revised, but maybe with some extra requirements such as insurance or permits. And then whether they said they were in favor of removing the ban or not, we did want to know, what do you think is most important for City Council to consider when deciding to revise this policy? And by far, as Dr. Matt said, how effectively the rules for responsible ownership can be enforced. 70% of people said that was most important to consider. And then next is whether permits to own them would be based on responsible ownership. Then whether owners would need to have liability insurance for their dog's behavior. And then lastly, well, fourth important, whether pit bulls are more or less dangerous than other dogs. So that is what the citizens said are most important to consider. And then we'll end on an easy one. About 60% of households own at least one dog. Why did we ask that? It sounds very simple, but I wanted to know, are people that do with the people with dogs or not with dogs, are they more likely or less likely to support this ban? A lot of hypotheses, at least I did. I had no idea which way this was going to go. And there's a notable difference in attitudes towards revising the ordinance based on dog ownership. The residents who owned dogs, particularly more than one, were significantly more likely to think the city should revise the policy in some way. It was 75% versus a 13% who think the ban should stay in place. That was the most interesting thing for the survey. Do you have any questions?
Any questions on the survey? So while it's not a statistically valid, sir, or whatever those statistic words are, because it is somewhat blind, if you will, it's more than just a polling of opinion. So there's
Absolutely.
some value, I think, in this information for sure.
But it's also important to remember that it's still a very small sample. So we did this, the results I just said are specifically locals. That was about 150, 160 people. So it's important, again, to take this as an initial pulse of what people generally are thinking, but not as a hard fast.
All right, so then our next step is to, I guess, comment, discuss it amongst ourselves, and then decide what direction we want to go. So with that, I would open the floor to anybody who wanted to add additional comment or had any thoughts they want to share.
I was gonna say, I'm in favor of removing the pit bulls from it. I've started with that, but when you look at the staff report, you look at even the comments that were made tonight. Statistically, okay, there were 6 pit bull bites in DeSoto, but 53 overall bites. And we have pit bulls in DeSoto. And it's one of those ones that if we're gonna have an ordinance that says they're banned, then there's no effectiveness if it comes up that they bit somebody, so now let's take action. Because if that's the criteria of, oh, there was an incident, then that falls under the dangerous dog ordinance. It doesn't need a breed-specific component if it's coming up based upon a complaint of the dog attacked or the dog was issued. And I've heard, like I said, I've not heard one complaint about pit bull. I've heard lots about a dog in Clearview City, a dog in Timber Trails that are not pit bulls. And also over in Arbor Ridge, there have been some. I know I go running with my dog a lot, and she's phenomenal. However, I would never take her to the doggy plunge. We took her once. She is perfectly fine with other dogs as long as they leave her alone. In the proximity of other dogs, she is fine. If they come at her with any level of speed, she will defend herself. But I know it. When we're running on the trail, it's the other dogs that I worry about. And I've never had to worry about pit bull out there. It's the other breeds and other types of dogs that I watch the owners, I mean, literally, some of them lifting the front 2 feet of the other dog up to keep them under control. And my dog that, like I said, I wouldn't trust her in the doggy plunge. She just keeps on doing her job of running straight ahead. So it's one of those ones that if we're gonna have an ordinance that says a breed specific, but we're not enforcing it unless there's an aggressive behavior, then that doesn't need the breed specific.
Yeah.
Now, do we need to look at enforcement of aggressiveness in dogs in general? I think our community would like that.
If I could just comment, so the statistics here, keep in mind, these are not just on people, these are, dogs on dogs. Also, and I don't know how you solve it, but, one of the biggest things you read about, or the most bites, are not dogs running around town biting people or dogs. They are family pets and primarily children that, for whatever reason, the dog is triggered and the child, obviously can't protect themselves. And so that's where you see, a lot of injury. So I just think it's important to keep in mind that it's not just, outside the home, off property. One of the concerns is, and I really don't know how to solve that, but it's.
But that concerns with shepherds, with Rottweilers, with other breeds as well. So,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, a few thoughts. I mean, in all, I've spent, several years volunteering regularly at an animal shelter, socializing dogs, and yeah, I came to a lot of the same conclusions and heard from a lot of the veterinary community about, ineffectiveness of breed bans and breed-specific bans being less effective than, responsible pet ownership being the solution in this nature-nurture discussion. At the same time, reading through this and taking a lot of time with the community feedback as well as the feedback from the medical community, one of my conclusions was this is even more complicated of a community issue than I realized, even realizing that it can be a complicated issue going into it. One of the things that was mentioned a lot in the just open comments of the survey was people wanting to see more enforcement of, leashing and issues with loose dogs and so forth. So, I would want us to take that under advisement because that was, nothing that was asked about specifically in the survey and yet very consistently, commented on from community residents. So I think we've got some, just community feedback there. I wouldn't want us to move forward lightly on this in terms of, I think if we were to change the policy, I think more robust community engagement would be important. And, because there were people even on the survey who had very strong feelings to the contrary of lifting the ban. And, I would want the city moving forward to be something where the community felt good about the direction. And I'm still not sure whether permits and insurance or some of these other elements should be considered even if lifting the ban. So where I've really ended up is feeling like this is something we should continue to consider. However, with the scope and amount of work and projects currently on the city's plate, and without a, significant incident to push forward prioritizing this above other items, I would suggest we, revisit this in a few months and look at what additional community engagement would be needed to really move forward and feel good about either a, set of restrictions or regulations versus just complete removal of the ban.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Kevin?
Oh, I can talk to hear myself talk, but, I'm a big dog person. I've trained and competed in competitive obedience, competitive agility, raised guide and service puppies. I just went to a Doc Dogs show over the weekend. We're jumping into the pool for distance and air, and I'm much more. I have much bigger issues with responsible pet ownership, whether it's breeding for aggression or conditioning for aggression or neglect. I have much bigger issue with pet neglect. Pit bull, I don't know, even not even listed there. Dog scares me to death, Belgian Malinois. I mean, police dog, but like in Doc Dogs, there were 2 Malinois that competed in that. And I think, they can be a very dangerous dog, but they can also be very obedient, as a police dog, right? So I can go either way. I can support really any issue. I don't think we need a pit bull ban. Bottom line is I don't think we need a pit bull ban, but I do have an issue with responsible pet ownership, but I don't know if we're going to address that in an ordinance or enforcement.
Yeah. Victoria?
Basically, same thing that Kevin said. It all comes down to the owner. Like you were saying, Rob, how your dog's limits. And that's what I know my dog's limits, and I know where I can and cannot take my dog. Because he is a very large and scary looking dog. But it shouldn't be a breed specific ban. Because there are more dogs out there that are way more aggressive and do way more damage than a pit bull could. So I don't think it's a pit bull issue, it's an owner issue, so I don't agree with it.
Well, and the current ordinance is also 1% pit bull, which any mix, I mean, how do you enforce that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Every dog do a DNA test, but
New funding source for you.
So I get, then, let's circle back to, Courtney's suggestion that, this does need, I think this does need more, certainly revision or lifting of, changing of this ordinance, I think needs a robust, it needs an opportunity for public comment at the minimum at a, you know, a public hearing here at council, and probably some more time for additional research to figure out, can we come up with an answer to the ownership, responsible ownership? What are the thoughts on how we schedule this into our workload? Are we comfortable, you know, pushing this down the road to, you know, somewhere September, October? I don't know what staff would say workload-wise, where something like this would
Yeah.
fit in better, or
So,
or do we see it as something that we should have immediate, you know, let's push it on in the next few meetings to try and bring this.
I like the sleep on it idea a bit. I think it's, you know, something I hadn't really thought a lot about until you see this language come up, and, you know, I don't feel like it needs action tonight. I kind of feel like it's something we can sift through a little bit, sleep on a little bit. I don't think that's a reason to not do something. I think all of our codes are always up for some sort of, you know, updating and revision, but I could sleep on it.
Mayor,
You brought it forward, I
mean, moving it down a month or two, that's fine. I think I don't think it's, I mean, from the consensus I'm hearing, it's really not a matter of whether to keep the pit bull part of it in. It's more a matter of taking the public opinion on revision of the aggressive dog ordinance and how to have that effectively enforced in the community, which is a much larger discussion, much larger issue.
Yeah.
And like I said,
incorporating leash law,
Yeah.
enforce, I mean,
And like I said, when I first brought it up to Brandon, and you'll back me up on this, it was twofold of, okay, the pit bull ban's not doing anything, there's no effectiveness to it, but yet we do have complaints about aggressive dogs, and most of them aren't, all of them weren't pit bulls. So it was a matter of, let's get rid of the breed specific, but let's look at the enforcement and how to make it where there is responsible accountability for aggressive behavior from dogs.
Mayor, if I may.
Certainly.
The staff is kind of recommending a public hearing on July 18th. That gives us a little bit of time to put some research together. Also, it avoids kind of a July 2nd, right before the 4th of July, public hearing, where may catch people off guard, which is our next meeting, July 2nd. It would allow us to kind of keep the ball rolling, but also have some research. I think with the survey being out, I think people are speaking about it. So it keeps it kind of in the conversation.
Momentum, don't lose that.
Yeah, but also allows us time to kind of put our research together. That is completely up to the governing body of when they would. The workload is a lot right now.
If I can just comment on the dog bites, you know, we have had issues in years past of there, you know, the sheriff's office not reporting to the city that there was a dog bite, but I can say from my standpoint, you know, and not so much, you know, another animal, but if there's a dog bite of a person, we do take that seriously. And, you know, what I always tell people as far as a dog owner is, look, you know, as a city, we really can't allow you to keep this dog in the city, because if it attacks again, you know, so, yeah, I don't know if there's all these dog bites, they've not come to my attention.
Yeah, and some of them haven't been bites as much as aggressive dogs charging that weren't on leash type of things. Where the fear of it was absolutely there. And I mean, I can tell you that when I'm riding my bike in the county and the dog comes out from the yard, it'll raise the hairs on your,
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've had that a couple times out in the county where a dog comes charging out from a field and runs alongside, and you don't know if they're just gonna run alongside or if they're gonna try and,
Take a
Take a
chunk
bite.
out of your calf.
so, and that's where I think some of the residents are talking about, like the leash laws, things like that, is where maybe it's not an actual physical bite. Although I've had one where my dog and I got into it in our neighborhood, it didn't get reported, but the owner, I knew the owner, responsible owner, just circumstances happened and they ended up taking care of the medical bills, so it never got reported. So,
So I guess my impetus for saying September was letting us get through the budget season for our meeting load.
what's July look like, Mike? Do we know? Is it gonna be a heavy docket or a lighter?
Yeah, I don't ever expect another light
Oh, I-
agenda ever again. Yeah, no, it does. It's pretty significant on that 18th meeting, yeah.
I was just thinking if we got through the budget and then we can take this on.
Take up those kind of things.
I would be in favor of getting through the budget, giving that I mean, there's a lot of questions and uncertainty and some
Yeah.
extra deliberation with our budget this year, and I'd be happy to revisit this on the other side of that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe more like September, like one of our September meetings.
Okay.
And maybe we pop another flash vote poll, something, in advance of that to
Keep it top of
stimulate
mind.
the community conversation and keep people engaged, but I think we have a consensus on that.
Yep, I think we have enough to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming, Dr. Fuhrer, Dr. Matt. Appreciate it. Item B, consider contract amendment number 1 with GBA to provide construction observation on the wastewater treatment plant project. Joe, is this your item?
It is,
All right.
Mayor, Councilmember. So back in January 23, we original contract with BDO to be the owner's rep, to help us with procurement, through initial design for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. So this amendment is to continue their services through the construction phase. So part of it will be to do project management, detailed design reviews, construction services, and other working with PDG, making sure that we're on track and getting the water plant built in compliance with the plans of the PDG. So their fee for this is $680,000. It will take us to August of 2025, which would be the building construction. About that time, we'll be down to just rehabbing the existing Belmont Basin. At that time, we would decide whether we need additional services from them to complete in the last couple of months. At that time, we should also know whether we've got savings we can construct, potentially be used to cover any additional expenses. So the recommendation is to approve the contract amendment number 1 for about $680,000. And authorize the administrator to execute. And I'm here to answer questions of this representative.
All right.
If there's any questions specific.
So just the first one is, this is part of the funding agreement with Panasonic for the project. You probably said that and I just ignored you, didn't you?
And it's in the write-up, so yes, that's part of within the development agreement that was approved with Panasonic.
Yes.
And second, is this still within the budgetary, what we had kind of budgeted and thought it would be?
It is, yeah. So we've been very purposeful about communicating budgetary changes, savings, and additional expenses with Panasonic. I'm giving them monthly updates. They've seen this number in those monthly updates for quite a while now, like 4 months. I think we've been talking about.
So it's still on target with what we were
Yes, it is.
seeing and looking
Yeah,
at?
that's right.
and we do anticipate some savings on the construction side. So things have been going very well through the initial phases.
Yep. Any other questions from council? Do we want to make GBA, they came to the meeting, should we call them up and make them answer? No, it looks like we don't need to hear from you tonight.
I'll make a motion, we approve Amendment 1 in the amount of $680,000 and authorize the city administrator to sign it with the GBA.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
McMorran,
Yes.
Tripp,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming. Item C, approved bid from Superior Bowen for the 2024 overlay program. Carry on.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So, yeah, we had, took bids last week. We had 3 bidders at Superior, Bowen, McEnany, and Little Joe's Asphalt. The original, or the budget is $750,000. The bid came in at, a little bit at $587.45 from Superior Bowen. You probably know Superior Bowen. They've been around the city forever. Great contractor. We received a really good bid. We had what we thought was going to be about $1 million plus program, and so we reduced some of the streets to be able to get it within budget. With this bid, we're able to add some streets back into it, and I would anticipate here probably the July 18th meeting or the first meeting in August to come back with a change order to add those streets in. The additional streets we would add would be Peoria from 83rd to 84th. And then we would look at a section of 89th Street between Cedar Creek and what's that, Hillview Drive. So we did get some pricing on it. So we're able to add 1 street. Depending on base repairs, we may be able to add 89th Street in. But we will
Okay.
look at doing that. So yeah, so we received a really good bid from Superior Bowen, and excited to be able to. So here's what will be done. That was bid. So we had these streets, and then we had 83rd Street. And so we will add Peoria from 83rd and take it back to the East 1 block. And then look at 89th Street once we complete most of the work back in the residential development. So the recommendation is to approve the bid from Superior Bowen in the amount of $584,877.95 and authorize the city administrator to execute the contract.
Okay. Any questions for city engineer?
I will make a motion to approve the bid and contract with Superior Bowen Asphalt Paving Company in the amount of $584,887.95 and authorize the city administrator to execute the agreement.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tripp,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
McMorran.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Item D, consider contract with Weideman Inc. to demolish the old wastewater treatment plant.
I'm done spending money after this. For tonight. So, so this has been in the CIP for a couple of years. I think it's got a budget around $70,000. And so kind of like what we did when we did the contract with Wiedemann for 82nd Street. They went through a competitive process through Johnson County for their labor rates and equipment rates. And so we kind of piggyback off that. We determined it was easier to be able to kind of meet out in the field and go through the different structures. Here's a map of the different structures that would be demoed and have them kind of walk around and look at what it would take. And so their bid was a little over $72,000. I added a little bit of contingency just because we don't know. We anticipate coming in right at budget, but we wanted to have a little bit of fluff given the fact that no one's been out there for many years. But the concrete structures will all be demoed. Generally what we'll do is most of the structures are below grade, so we'll knock the walls down about 4 feet below grade. We will break up the bottom so that water will be able to drain through them, and then we'll just push the walls in and then fill them up. We've got a couple wood structures out there that we'll demo, and a little grading that we'll do out there to kind of flatten the site out. So we will start this probably here in about 2 or 3 months. We look for about a 30 to 60 day for completion for the work. So the recommendation would be to approve the contract with Weaver Godfrey in the amount of $78,000 and authorize the city administrator to execute the contract.
All right. And they're aware that there is that residence right along 83rd Street, and I know he's got a couple of grandkids that are staying there
Yeah.
quite a bit.
So we have 2 ways to we would work with them to see whether that's a concern coming off 83rd Street. If not, we would come back along the railroad right away to
Okay.
access the site with their.
Yeah, that's all I'd ask, that we communicate with Mr. Lawhead.
Yeah, so we'll
and
make sure that, we have a one-on-one with them and the contractor to make sure
Yeah.
that we're doing what,
how we're
They feel
hauling
it's
that
right.
stuff out and accessing the site. Questions from council?
Just one comment, just to be clear for the public, this is not the old water treatment plant that Alco purchased, but this is the old wastewater treatment plant.
That many people probably didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Only other question is just about noise level and timing of demolition and, if there's going to be noisier activities, also there fair number of residences in the area, just any communication we can do and also minimize any of that impact.
yeah, and we'll make sure that we communicate with the resident right there off 83rd Street. And if he has issues with, using that road even so it's access to it, then we'll modify the access, and like I said, we'll come around the backside and come up the railroad right away. There is a road up there, so we will work with it to make sure that we accommodate that.
All right, I think I'm ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contract with Wiedemann Inc. in the amount of $78,000 and authorize the city administrator to execute.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Tripp.
Yes.
McMorran.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Item E, consider ordinance 2616, revising city code on economic development incentives.
Yes, council. This is a topic that we've been at for several months. It doesn't seem like we're ever done tweaking our economic incentive policy. Since its inception, we've reviewed it on a pretty regular basis for just changing conditions and changing priorities of the city. Most recently, the main impetus for the current discussion was we wanted to incorporate the new tool that became available in Johnson County most recently, which is the RHID program. Essentially would be a TIF for residential developments. Works much like a TIF. So it captures the increment of property tax after the development, captures that and reimburses the developer for costs associated with the project. So that was the primary goal going in, and we discussed some of those mechanisms several months ago and provided you red lines at that time to incorporate that. At the same time, we thought it was reasonable to get the input of our financial advisor and bond counsel on some specific tweaks to the language to make it more clear, to incorporate some new state statutes that had been incorporated recently. So I did provide the red line, largely the red line version that are in your packets. I think you'd seen most of that before. Most recently, we held a workshop in May to discuss in more detail the incentive areas and the incentive matrix. And so we spent a little bit of time with that incentive map. So in your packet, I included the currently effective incentive map, and then a proposed new incentives map. So that's Exhibit B. So the first page of Exhibit B I'm displaying now, that's the existing map. Second page, that's the proposed map, and this is the one we talked about mostly in May. In connection with the map, and I know that this display is bad, but so these areas correlate to area numbers in this incentive matrix that defines what the future land use designation is, what the targeted industry would be. There's been tweaks to those resulting from recent changes to future land use map. Also talks about the specific strategic plan goals and strategies. So that's a column that has been completely overhauled because we're almost done overhauling our strategic plan. So this column that you see, and I apologize, I wasn't able to produce a red line version because this is in Excel and it just can't do that easily. But the one that's in your packet is the new one. So it articulates the new goals and strategies from the yet to be adopted but almost final strategic plan. And those are articulated at the bottom of that second page of that. These goals are articulated there, as are the strategies. So that column lines up now with the new strategic plan. Other major differences in the eligibility and level of incentives matrix here. Obviously, we incorporated the new areas. I'll talk about those just a little bit. New areas, I think area 18, 19, 20, and 21 are new to the plan. We also combined old areas 14 and 15 that were at the K10 and Kill Creek interchange into one incentive area. So obviously the matrix needed to be changed for that. On the benefit district column, that first column there under the eligibility portion, we used to have percentages there, 100%, 50%, and there's recently been some confusion, some back and forth over what that meant. We decided in the workshop, we're just going to say it's eligible or it's not, and work the level out on an individual case-by-case basis.
So as a note, and I think on 14, you still have that as, you didn't
how
get
did that? Oh, no.
So-
That should say eligible.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
That's- So,
Thank you, Mayor.
you're welcome.
That's a good catch. Sorry about that. I'm sure that's the only thing in here that could use some revision. So essentially what's in front of you tonight, and I guess we can go through just quickly the map and obviously answer any questions you have. But if you wish to incorporate these revisions, as I've got it shown, Patrick did prepare an ordinance that restates all of the materials, and I included that in the packet. In the electronic Google Drive, it was a separate item. So what's that ordinance number?
2616.
2616. If you're so inclined to accept that, please pass that ordinance. So just a very brief summary, just from memory here on this map. I talked about that we revised the interchange area around Kill Creek and K10 was separated into two different areas. They were a lot the same in the incentives, so we decided to combine them in one area. We took out some of these property. This was larger. The area south of 95th Street was wider, so we narrowed that down just a bit for that area. The areas that include the Astra Enterprise Park and Flint Commerce Center on the previous map are shown shaded essentially in as existing incentives already in place. We've redone that here in this gray shading. We added another few, the Flint residential parts here. There's one along Edgerton, and then there's one along 103rd Street adjacent to Clearview City that have incentives in place. So those are shaded, as is the Merck portion of Area 7, which includes the Merck campus, also shaded. We added Area 20 here, which is at the south, at 19 and 20, which is are at the interchange of Edgerton Road and K10. Then we added Area 15 as well, which is a part of 15 we annexed recently. There's other areas of 15 that have not been annexed. And then we also added Area 21, because we did recently annex that area as well. Area 18 was, I think it was in there before, let me see, yeah, it was, 18 was in there before. So from memory, another little, I think we tweaked Area 4 to include Anderson Hill, is that the subdivision name? Off of Kickapoo. But beyond that, I think everything else is as it was before. So I'll stop there if anybody else has any other questions, comments, discussion, revisions. Glad to hear those
Okay.
now.
So, questions from council, thoughts on, these were Mike's capturing of our comments during the discussion. Do we think we captured them all?
One check, and I didn't have notes on it, but on the table for the reduction of maximum incentive level on residential projects over time, I thought we knocked a year off the end of that, kind of speeded up the whole process. There's no markup shown. Yeah, I thought we knocked a year off the end of that.
Yeah.
I don't have notes from a meeting.
Yeah, I thought we just
I don't
took
know, Rob, did
it,
you keep notes on that?
I'm gonna go back and see if I have.
I was pretty sure we knocked a year off and then kind of,
Talking about it.
yeah, I don't know what we,
I don't think we came to like an actual decision.
maybe.
But,
Yeah.
because everybody was kind of all over the place with it.
No, I don't have my notes. I do remember taking specific notes.
We talked about it, but I don't remember a conclusion.
I think we talked about at the 20%, 10%, no one's gonna.
It didn't make,
Yeah.
it
It
no
didn't
longer
make
made
sense.
sense.
So
Right.
it would actually be the 2 years.
Right, it was like, yeah,
The transaction costs would exceed.
right, so we knocked a year off
I
and
thought we took like 28 to 30 and then that was it.
I think that is what we did.
And-
At least that's what we talked about, but,
Yeah,
you know,
I'm
Victoria,
trying
I
to
think
look
you're
it
probably right, we kicked it all around and then said, let's do this.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's no reason to come in for a 10% incentive.
no, it doesn't pay for the paperwork, the administrative.
So are we thinking just take out the last two lines of that table?
Take 20, either that or you turn 2028 into 30%, but still,
Oh, I
it's probably
see.
not even worth the transaction cost.
Well, and at this point, with all the growth and interest we've already seen, I mean, you know, this was meant to signal that we may not be incentivizing growth like we are into the future. And where we're standing today in 2024, I'm perfectly comfortable getting 2028 and 2029 off of there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
I agree
because
with
we can add them or a future governing body can add them if there's a need
Yep.
to spur additional.
Because that's what we're always doing, is kind of
Right.
managing what's out
Right,
in front.
so-
Yeah, I agree with.
Yeah,
I agree with
and
Courtney.
frankly, once you get below that 40% level, it doesn't make any sense. Would anybody even be interested in that? So, it's a good point.
That was the only thing that caught my attention other than the table.
Yep.
So I've made those changes. If you wanted to pass the ordinance with those two revisions, we could do that.
So that's a,
I had one other question.
Certainly.
And I don't know if we came to a conclusion, and I apologize because I can't find it in the markup quickly. But we had discussed at least one of the incentive areas looking at affordability as a potential trigger for being open to incentive. And I believe it was an area that already had infrastructure. And again, I don't have my notes in front of me, and I apologize for that. But I didn't see anything noted regarding that.
so are you suggesting an edit?
It
Or-
was something we had discussed in workshop, and I'm just not seeing it reflected here, and I'm gonna try and see if I can, looking at the map, jog my
It
memory.
wasn't the duplex triangle that's off 87th Street
Oh,
that we were talking about adding a affordable?
Oh, yeah.
right, it was. thank you.
It's not gonna be duplexes anymore.
Right, it can't be.
I was just
right,
gonna
right.
say, now I remember why.
Oh, that
Yep.
was it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
That's why it's
so
Yeah.
not.
can't-
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for jogging my memory. I'm like, gosh, I remember
That's
having
good,
this
that's good.
discussion and I don't see it
Yeah.
reflected, so
Does
thank
that
you.
satisfy your concern?
I mean,
That answered that question?
it answers the question. I mean, I still have, the desire to keep making sure that we're looking at ways to, as we have in our strategic plan, ensure we have, an affordable mix of housing and are looking at ways to address that. But that's more a comment than,
Right.
anything else.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2616, amending Article 13 of Chapter 1 of the City Code to update the city's policies and procedures related to economic incentives available from the city, including a modification of 1-13, 1-1303, paragraph C, to remove the lines for year 2028 and 2029, including their maximum incentive levels, and by editing the economic incentives matrix relative to Area 14 and the benefit district to change the language from up to 50% of public infrastructure to eligible.
Second?
All right. Brandon, you got the motion?
I believe so.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Tripp,
Yes.
Daniels, Hanamichael.
Yes.
McMahon.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Item F, budget discussion.
You're looking at your watch already, Mayor.
Check and see where we
I got my timer on.
Okay.
This was a nice little read.
5-minute warning now?
It's, yeah, I'm wondering. I'll do my best.
This is like a third of the thickness of that last one.
I know,
discussion.
yeah, no,
See
this is-
ya.
I've tried to keep it concise
Hey, the
here.
GBA people got a contract approved, they're staying.
They want to know if they're going to have money to pay this. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. So last time we talked about the general fund, all the stuff that impacts the mill levy. I had a good discussion on that. Very interesting time to do a budget here in DeSoto. It's the same story with our revenue funds, the water and the sewer. Our refuse fund is also a revenue, but it's a lot simpler, simply pass through, straight through. With the water and sewer budgets, we're coming into 2025 when we will be commissioning these new treatment plants. The water treatment plant is essentially a brand new facility, top to bottom. And so it'll be new. That hopefully you would think that the assumption would be that a newer facility would be more efficient, easier to operate, lower costs per gallon than the old plant that we've been maintaining over time. But at the same time, our water demand is going to go up by 45%. So there's that issue on the water. On the sewer, it's similar, a little different. The current plant is being expanded, and so the current plant isn't as old as the water plant. The sewer plant is 2007 vintage, and the technology we're using is the same stuff that we've been using. So it's a little easier to extrapolate future costs on the sewer than it might be on the water right now. We know the power. If you treat twice as much sewer flow, you're going to need twice as much power. Not exactly the same on the water. But again, we're going to have major revenue influx for the rest of this year and next year, represented by Panasonic. So very interesting time. The punchline really on the water is that because of the revenue streams and producing more water, it is true that you get a volume discount when you produce larger quantities. You don't have to apply the type of peaking factor that maybe you otherwise would apply just from regular residential growth. Panasonic's going to use a consistent amount every day, 365 days a year. That does a lot for your efficiencies and your operational efficiencies. So the punchline on the water is, I believe there's a real opportunity to significantly reduce the water service charges within the 5-year projection period. I'm not suggesting that we do that next year, but the projections show in 26 and 27 that we can reduce the water rates by a combined 8% over those 2 years, and still keep our fund balance levels at healthy levels. The sewer is not quite as rosy. The sewer flows we'll be getting from Panasonic, they're not as much. So the capacity that it takes up and the treatment there. So the revenue streams is a little more muted there. But still are projecting really less than inflationary rate increases throughout the 5-year period. So that's the punchline before I get started. I wanted to get that out before my 5 minutes was up, so I think I did that. So with that as a starting point, what I did, similar to the discussions we had for the mill levy, or for the general fund, the spreadsheet that's exhibit to the staff report shows you what happened in 2022, shows you what happened last year, shows you this year, and then the 2025, the proposed budget is really just a column in this spreadsheet for 2025 that I've outlined in red. This budget here for the water, and it's the same for the sewer, when you're trying to project future costs for the expanded facilities and the amount of water that we're going to have to produce, some costs are fixed at the water plant. Some costs are variable with how much water you produce. So the two that really come to mind are chemicals and power demand. So if you produce twice as much water, you're going to have to put twice as much lime, twice as much chlorine, all that. So chemical costs vary relationally to the demand. Power is the same way. You're going to pump twice as much water and run the plant twice as much. So those specific costs that are related specifically to the demand that Panasonic will have are shown as orange lines in this spreadsheet. So I've shown those throughout. So in general, we've got chemicals, tools and equipment. The main ones are utilities as well, and some personnel projections. The revenues from Panasonic specifically are also broken out from the general revenues, and that's just one green line toward the bottom there on the water forecast. Sewers the same way. So if you go through this, I'm showing here the sewer fund, it's the same. Chemicals, tools, equipment, variable. Utilities are variable. We also have some personnel considerations in there as well. Again, one line item for Panasonic. So that's kind of the structure of your packet as you go through. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about the specifics, then comes some specific numbers that are in there, as long as we're still on board. So we'll talk about the water fund. Revenues, we start with the projections for this year. We did account for the increase in revenues from Panasonic. They've started using water. They started it before the first of the year. The concrete batch plants out there. We did see a little bump, a little slight bump in 23. Nothing really significant, but we did have started to see in 24 revenues from that. So the concrete batch plant were the bulk of the sales and some earthwork activities. And so with the water service charges year to date, projecting that year forward, look like revenues are going to be about $2.3 million. That's a 15% increase from last year. And we didn't just get all that from the other growth. That's a lot from Panasonic. We had budgeted a 4% rate increase for this year, which was actually lower than kind of the inflation, when we were talking about this last year. Based on these projections that we have now, we're not going to need that rate increase. So recommendation, we don't, and if we thought we'd need it, you would have heard before now. But so forego that rate increase. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on the on the expenses, because we're trending a little higher on our chemicals and a little bit higher on the utility, as you would expect. So by the end of the year, we might need a budget amendment for the water fund. But remember, the budget restraint is only on what you spend. You know, we don't need an amendment if we're going to exceed our revenues. But if we're going to exceed our expenses, we might. So for that reason, we may by the end of the year need a budget amendment in the water fund. But we're not going to need the rate increase. As I mentioned, we've estimated the Panasonic revenues separately in green in the spreadsheet. So for the rest of this year, as I've said, they've already started using water. As they install the tooling and commission their systems in there, they're going to need more water. So really, that most of that starts in about August, is what their projections are showing. So that by the end of this year, they're estimating an average use of about 300,000 gallons a day by the end of this year. So that equates to, yeah, it's 300,000 gallons a day. It does equate to a revenue for this year of $300,000. That's really confusing.
It is.
Those two numbers are the same.
Coincidental.
I wish it is coincidental. So if you project the revenues out in the 2025 budget, and we're working with the latest projections from Panasonic, and these have changed several times, you know, over the process of the development agreement, and since the construction started, they're kind of changing all the time. But the most current ones, and we're actually due for new projections here real soon. The most current one has them, starting at about 300,000 gallons per day now, and ramping up by the end of 2025 to about 900,000 gallons a day. You might remember our benefit district, or our development agreement says that by the time they're in full production, they'll need about 1.4 million gallons a day. So they won't be quite there by the end of 2025. They'll still be installing the second wing. But regardless, with the projections we got now, it looks like about $1.5 million in revenue for the fund. And so projecting that on out, 26 through 30, the projections, 5-year projections, once they're in full force operation, they'll average about 1.1 MGD of demand, which is a little lower than its current projection. That'll equate to about $2.9 million in revenue stream over that time. So when we talk about the water service charges, no rate increase proposed for the 2025 budget, even though the 26 and 27 projections are showing a combined 8%. It's 4% each year, 8%. I don't want to recommend that for 25 just because of the unknowns. We just don't know enough about what the new plant's going to cost. We'll be operating both of them for a time, so I want to hedge that just a little bit. So no rate increase there, but there is an 8% reduction in the projections. Of course, we'll monitor that throughout the rest of this year. On the expense side, we talked about those variable expense items. So those are shown on those orange lines. Looks like the amount of water we have to treat is going to increase by about 65%. So in the budget projections, I've increased those line items by extrapolated those line items by that amount. On the personnel side, you'll see in the budget projections there's actually addition of 2 people to the water department. One would be an operator, another would be a maintenance technician, float type person, both at a salary point of $60,000. So they are in the budget for the expense side. But obviously we're going to monitor the revenues. It's sort of like the discussion we had with the building inspector. If those revenues come in like we think they're going to, and we do have a need for the added personnel, we'll hire the added personnel. If they don't, we won't. So that's the story on the personnel. Vehicle and equipment, we're going to need a new lease purchase payments for service vehicles for those new 2 people. And there's a dump truck in the 2025 budget, F550, that's replacing an older one in the fleet. So that'll be purchased with electric utility fund reserves, or electric utility fund loan, as we've done in the past several years. One big item here in these projections is this transfer to the water maintenance fund. So when we start to look at our capital improvements planning and just long-term goals for the department, one of the big things is a comprehensive utility maintenance preservation, really that program that looks at all of our assets and updates those on an annual basis. We have the water maintenance funds set up for that purpose, and we've been funding that to the tune of about $45,000 per year. That's this year's budget. That was last year's budget. That'll continue, obviously, in 2025. That's not enough to really do that sort of a program for the whole system. Specifically, when you look at equipment replacement funds for the new plant. Now, 45 grand might be enough to kind of keep your water lines flowing water, but it really won't be enough when you look at the service life of the brand new equipment we're going to be putting in, and you need to replace that. That equipment replacement fund starts to get expensive. We're building a new water tower too, so the 45,000 isn't enough. In the 2025 budget, I'm showing an additional transfer to that of $200,000 for 2025. And in the projection, starting in 26 and onward, the contribution to that is $800,000 annually. So keep that in mind when we're looking at, and that's even with the reduction of 8% in the in the water rate. So that number is very arbitrary at this point, as is the $200,000 transfer for next year. We really won't know what that's going to be until we are able to do that full system analysis, get that asset management program defined. Part of the engineering work for the water treatment facility is establishing what that would be, establishing those O&M costs, for the new facility long term. We just don't have it yet. So that $200,000 next year, the $800,000 starting in 2026, is that sort of buffer, that hedge against all these unknowns, in addition to not just cutting the rates by 5% next year. So I think what that'll allow us to do is kind of enter this realm where we're actually truly a full cost recovery on our water rates. Because up to now, we've kind of been subsidizing the long-term health by putting some. It also allows us, a fund to build new improvements, if they're needed, a hydraulic connection in town or some other mechanism there. So,
does it include money to clean the bottom of the water tower?
No, that is not included, Mayor.
Sorry.
Point well taken. Yes, it's been on the list for a while. So that's the story on the water fund. So the
Good
5-year,
story, Mike.
it is a good
I like that
story.
story.
I know we like it. Like I said, very interesting time. So this is kind of how the chart looks on this water fund. It's a little different. I mean, I spend a lot of time looking at these projection charts, and so what you see here is the red line is the fund reserve, essentially, as a percentage of the operating expenses. So operating expenses is going to go way up because we're going to be making twice as much water. It's going to be going to be more chemicals, utilities. Obviously, revenues are going to go way up. But this line, this fund balance line, is going to remain constant. So that's even with dumping $200,000 next year and $800,000 each year and reducing the water rate by 8% a couple of years. That's what the fund will look like. So lots to there's hedges in there already. Lots of unknowns. It's kind of like that's my best guess, and it's very rosy at this time, and I'm kind of reluctant to paint such a rosy picture, really. And so I guess we concentrate on the fact that we're only budgeting for 1 year, and a lot can change. But it's a good picture for the water fund, assuming those revenues come in, assuming that. Sewer fund is a little bit, like I said, kind of the same story. The revenues are going to increase again. We budgeted a 4.5% rate increase this year. Doesn't look like we're going to need that. We'll be on target without the rate increase. Highlighted the Panasonic revenues in green, projecting this year. So far, the sewer hasn't seen any flow from Panasonic at all yet. They're working on that now. They're putting in a temporary system that to deliver flows down to the sewer treatment plant. That will be online. We know by September, probably even a little in advance of that. So we'll start seeing that revenues. They're going to average between September and the end of the year, average about 150,000 gallons a day. So if you total that revenue, projection about $85,000 in additional revenue for 2024. For 2020, or I'm sorry, yeah, for that's 24. For 2025, average daily uses of about 400,000 starting in May. And Panasonic's projections have verified that starting next year. So that'll add about $450,000 of revenue to the sewer fund. And then the projections following on from that are the same, essentially. This, the sewer rate charge, there is 2.5% sewer rate increase proposed for the 2025 budget, and that's shown throughout the rest of the projection period. So it's not quite as rosy as the water fund, but it is less than what we're expecting the inflationary rate to be. So, our commodities are they're going to cost more, next year than they will this year. We've projected that out on an inflationary basis, and the 2.5% increases are less than what those expenses would be. So like we did with the water, the variable items are shown separately. On the personnel side, we are showing one new position, another plant operator. The vehicle equipment replacement is the same, a payment for a service vehicle for that new person. And then the sewer maintenance fund's the same story as the water maintenance fund. Currently, the 25 budget shows $20,000 contribution to that fund, which is not enough. It also shows, the 2025 budget shows an additional $25,000. And then starting in 26, we'll increase that to $75,000. So the projections, once you do all that, the projections like this, again, the fund balance increases, but the percentage, as a percentage of operating expenses, still maintains above, between 30 and 35% through the projection period. So that was what I had, and by my count, Mayor, that's about 15 minutes.
Okay.
So happy to have any discussion, answer any questions you might have about all that.
Any questions?
One really small question on salaries and wages for the water plant in your chart.
Oh, in the spreadsheet?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
There's $40,000 shown this year for it. Are we expecting to hire one of those
Yeah,
individuals this year yet?
that's right. That's a possibility. Don't know. It's not. We don't have that recommendation yet. We may see a need for that. So that's just to maintain.
And so that's just that potential partial year employment of that individual who would then be part of the two funded under the 120
exactly
the next year.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Just clarifying that. Thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay. So what part of the budget are you presenting?
Well, so at the next meeting, there'll be all the other funds. And so those are, there's a lot of them, but there are things like the sewer maintenance fund, the water maintenance fund, the transient gas tax fund, the refuse fund is the biggest one left. With the CDBG stuff.
Law enforcement.
That was in the first. That was, we talked about that last. All the little funds, the budget dust stuff. As Pat Guilfoyle will call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's next week. And Brandon, I did want to mention that we got the final assessed valuations from the appraiser. We got that last week, or maybe it was a week before. Turned out those were a good 5% higher than what they told us they were going to be in February, which is what I set, what I did all the calculate. Anyway, as it turns out, it doesn't really materially make a difference to us because we are holding our dollars collected from mill rate, the same dollars. Remember our discussion that we had, the revenue neutral intent? we're keeping that. It just means that the mill rate, instead of going from 19.8 down to 14.1, I think, it's gonna be below it's maybe a 13.8 or so, something like that. That mill difference is gonna be more, because our valuation is higher than we thought it was gonna be. Regardless, it's gonna be same money collected. And I was gonna ask Brandon, put you on the spot, when do we need to have that revenue neutral rate thing noticed to the county? Is it before our next meeting?
It is not before our next meeting. I was
The second meeting in July, right?
yeah, I was actually gonna bring that up to you after the meeting. We have to set a mill.
Yeah.
In between our first meeting and well, I guess no, the second meeting's the 18th, right? So
Right.
this is due the 20th of July.
Okay,
So by the 20th, we have to notify the county what our expected mill is.
so I'll include that in the discussion for the next meeting about, we need to set that mill, remember?
And setting that is like setting our ceiling, essentially. We can end up going lower, but we
That's
cannot
right.
go higher.
Right, right.
Okay.
So what I heard at the last meeting was, for purposes of that notice, we're okay not just noticing the 14 or 13.8 to get us just barely over. We're okay noticing a mill levy that would equate to a residential savings of somewhere around $50 or $100 maybe, but not the 150. And that will go in the notice, but we do still have the intent to meet that dollar for dollar. That's what okay, I'm seeing head nods. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have that discussion at the next meeting.
But given the new, yeah, we.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, with the new information, maybe we just the 14.4 and know that we have.
Well, maybe
a half
that's
a
where it
percent,
is,
right?
yeah. I'll have to rerun those numbers.
But yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
Probably not immediate, but I know that our new members haven't been through the process of where we borrow from our electric utility.
Oh, right,
fund,
yeah,
so
yeah.
Probably maybe either offline at one of your meetings with Mike, or
For sure.
we can just explain how we loan ourselves money out of the electric utility fund to save interest costs and gain a little bit, but it's something we started many, many years ago, that we always keep the balance in that electric utility, or protect the principal, but we borrow to buy major purchases and
Yep.
then pay it back, so.
It'll be a good time to have that next, because the electric utility
Is part
fund
of the-
budget is
okay.
part of one of those other funds.
So.
So we can
just a
address that.
5-minute
next
synopsis of, that's better than what I just explained.
Will that add to my 15 minutes that I get?
Yeah, you can have another
Okay.
minutes, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, good. Thank you,
discussion.
council, yeah.
Item 5 is executive session. We don't have any, right? Nothing came up? Advisory reports, Mike, anything for the group tonight?
No, sir. Happy to answer any questions.
City attorney?
Nothing for me.
City engineer?
No, I'm good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Put you on the spot, anything on Arcadian streetlights? Looks like they pulled wire. Anything on getting those Arcadian Estate streetlights hooked up?
We sent notice to them, I think we've done everything we can to go put them up ourselves.
Well, they pulled the wire, the conduits are sitting there with the wire hanging out of them.
Yeah.
That's an Evergy issue?
Well, if they got the wires in them, yes, then Evergy should be scheduled. I'll get with Evergy to see if they're scheduled to go out there tomorrow or not.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I didn't know they got the wires in them yet, so I'll check on that tomorrow.
Brandon, Assistant City Administrator.
Just a couple quick things. I just wanted to let council know that the property tax relief program is extremely popular. I need to buy Maite and Edgar breakfast. We are at 48 applications as of this afternoon. Our expectation is somewhere around 50, given the $25,000 dollar amount, and roughly $500 will be the average award we give out. I'm going through them. I am only through 8 of them. I'm going to lock my door next week in my office and kind of through quite a bit of them. I expect to have kind of a report back to you at the July 2nd meeting with kind of where we are, and a conversation if you guys would like to expand the program and add additional funding, or if you're fine with keeping it at $25,000. But I did want to let you know that it is successful, and we're working through that right now. The other thing I did have, just a reminder that the next meeting is July 2nd. I'll send a calendar invite after this meeting. And then there are a couple events popping up. One being tomorrow, the Legends of Rock Summer Concert Series. There is a DIY jewelry workshop in the Senior Center. That is on the 24th, which is a Monday. And then the makeup movie, Whitney, help me, I'm sorry, I forgot. Oh, she's gone. She left, never mind. The makeup movie, which is Wonka, is on the 29th. She left me a note, 29th. That's it.
Thank you, Brandon. Council comments. Victoria, anything for, sorry, I caught you with your brother.
Were you a server in a previous?
Yeah, right. Rob?
Not tonight.
Courtney?
I just wanted to commend the work of Whitney, the Chamber of Commerce, and Happy Valley Farms, because starting July, we will have our DeSoto Farmer Market up and running as a collaborative effort, and I've heard a lot of positive feedback and excitement from the community already about that. I'm definitely looking forward to our first farmers market. Looks like July 13th. So.
Thank you. Kevin?
Nothing.
All right. I'll just briefly share. Last Thursday, I shared at the chamber the state of the city, which a big part of that message that I shared was the property tax relief that we're anticipating being able to provide. So just kind of a recap of the benefits of that we're seeing from redevelopment of the Sunflower ammunition plant into a jobs center that is going to create opportunity for our community, and it's just well received by that body. Got a lot of I think the level of tax relief that we're proposing was maybe a little shocking to some people, but the revenue projections, the picture that we're painting, and makes that possible, and I'm looking forward to that being able to move forward. And I think that's all I have. So,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.